Well, a brand new parliament means some brand new challenges for the Prime Minister and his government. For more on what to expect as Parliament returns, Government House Leader Stephen MacKinnon joins me now. It's good to see you again, sir. Thanks for being here today.
Good evening, David.
The Prime Minister, in his speech to caucus yesterday, said the government will introduce multiple pieces of legislation about making life more affordable. We know about the middle-class tax cut. We know about the GST on new homes. Is there more beyond that, or is that what we're talking about here?
Well, I don't want to prejudge the House of Commons, but those are obviously the high points. Those are commitments that we've made to Canadians. We're eager to get on with, yes, a tax reduction. It is important that we repeat that, and yes, on the housing front, we do want to move on as well with the GST reduction on new home construction. So those are going to be important features. Won't say that's all in our plans, but those are certainly the high points, David.
Well, there's the free trade legislation as well that presumably you'll need to pass, right, to lift all federal free trade issues internally by Canada Day. But it's going to be a short sitting of just a few weeks. I mean, is that kind of the extent of the legislative agenda, or is there more to come beyond that as of right now?
Oh, there will be other legislation either introduced, maybe even debated to some extent in this session of Parliament. We do have focused objectives. First, one of the first orders of business, of course, as well, David, is to fund the government, to make sure our border agents are able to keep working, our Service Canada agents are able to keep providing benefits to Canadians, and so on. So we have to do the very, very important work of allocating money so that the Government of Canada can function. That is another one of our top objectives in this session, but you'll see this roll out over the coming days.
Okay, so but those three, the GST cut on houses, the free trade by Canada Day, and the tax cut by Canada Day, those are definitely, you want all of those passed before Parliament rises for the summer, correct?
In effect, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So look, one of the other issues that is not so much before Parliament, but that parliamentarians will have to deal with is what to do about the NDP. They fell short of official party status, but Don Davies says there are conversations happening about some extra resources to allow them to function effectively as a parliamentary unit. How inclined are you as the Government House Leader to give them that, and what do you think the Bloc and the Conservatives will say about it?
Well, and as I think I told your colleague, Ms. Barton, on the weekend, registered party status is a question of law. And so the NDP fell short. The voters did not get them over that threshold. But I have had, and I know other parties have had, conversations with Mr. Davies about other ways that we can cooperate, perhaps even facilitate some of their work. I think it's important not to, get into too many details about that, but obviously we're open to having those conversations. We want to honor the traditions and the status of the New Democratic Party and the members that are here, so we'll do what we can to accommodate those discussions. It's important, though, to point out that I don't get to decide these things unilaterally.
Of course.
This is a product of all-party cooperation, and so I know those discussions will continue, and we've entered them with a very constructive spirit.
But the way Mr. Davies described it today, so he said this all publicly, is that he's looking for money essentially to hire 6 to 10 staff to allow them to be a professional operation inside the House of Commons, right? Given that it's a minority parliament. That may be an easier thing to agree on between the parties, but giving up questions and committee seats, because it's all zero-sum with that, is more difficult. Do you think there's a world where the NDP gets more questions or a presence on committees?
Well, if they're going to get more questions, those questions, because there's a set number of questions, by definition would have to come from other parties. So I'll leave that to those parties to decide. Right now, of course, they are unlikely to have seats on standing committees of the House of Commons. And again, that's not a matter that I can decide unilaterally, and I don't think the opposition parties are inclined either to give up their seats on committees. But as Mr. Davies has probably indicated, and pursuant to my chats with him, there are many ways that we can be open-minded about the role of the New Democratic Party, and I know we are.
One of the big events that happened today, in addition to the King and the Queen arriving in Canada, of course, was the election of Francis Scarpaleggia as the new Speaker of the House of Commons. We've talked before how difficult Parliament was in the last session under former Speaker Greg Fergus. What is your sense of Mr. Scarpaleggia's challenge, and what do you make of the fact that the 2 Conservative names that were on the ballot dropped out last minute?
Well, perhaps just a word about Parliament, and I'll be happy to speak about Mr. Scarpaleggia in a moment, David, but I do think that any parliamentarian who wants to come in here and gum up the works, procedure, delay, obstruction, I think they're fundamentally misreading the mood of Canadians right now, and you know, we want to remind people of that. Mr. Scarpaleggia is well equipped. This is a person who's been in the House of Commons for 20 years, has very ably represented his constituents, used to work for Clifford Lincoln, for those who study political history, another great parliamentarian in Canadian history. And no one should assume that Mr. Scarpaleggia is anything less than a very skilled parliamentarian. I have seen him do research, put together substantive speeches on substantive issues. This is a person steeped in Parliament who loves the institution, and I think Mr. Scarpaleggia is as competent and as skilled as anyone who could be in that chair.
But Mr. D'Entremont had eyes on the speakership. Yeah. He had been the deputy speaker the last time, Chris D'Entremont, the Nova Scotia Conservative MP.
Yes.
Him and Mr. Nader dropped out today. I mean, do you think that's just parliamentary math, that the Conservatives didn't want to run the risk of a speaker who would vote with the government in terms of a tie by tradition, effectively reducing the numbers on the opposition side?
You'd have to ask them what their tactical mission was there, David. All I know is that we're very, very happy to have a very competent and qualified parliamentarian in that speaker's chair.
Okay, your caucus on Sunday had the opportunity to vote for the Reform Act.
Yep.
To give itself the authority to vote out a leader. Now, I'm not trying to suggest with this question that anybody's trying to dump Mr. Carney this early in his mandate, but there was, you know, the frustration of not having a formal mechanism in the months leading up to the actual resignation of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Why do you think your party has decided not to adopt the Reform Act, given the recent history of the Liberals?
Well, the first and most obvious thing is this is prescribed by law. Caucus procedures, caucus practices are by definition private, and it shall stay thus. I will say this, though. The Liberal Party itself, members of the Liberal Party, has a vibrant constitution, has accountability measures. We have a kind of our own transparency and compliance regime, if you will. And this was a bill that was passed during a Conservative majority parliament that does bind all caucuses. We take that responsibility very seriously. It is the law of the land. But I will say that Liberals have declined to vote for these measures now on 4 separate occasions. And I think there may be something about that particular act that is not perhaps consistent with how Liberals wish to govern their own affairs.
I do remember, though, Chrystia Freeland saying during the leadership that never again can caucus be left with a way not to lead to a leadership change. This is one of the issues she ran on. Now, obviously, Mr. Carney won by a landslide outcome. But it was a source of frustration. Do you anticipate this will never be a source of frustration in the future of the Liberal Party and just not something you need a plan for? Or is it just the Reform Act plan isn't the right one for the Liberals?
I think that the mechanisms prescribed by the Reform Act may not be, again, consistent with how the average Liberal MP sees accountability.
Okay. Well, Stephen MacKinnon, one last question. I know you're not responsible for this because it is all the other parties that do have to weigh in on what happens with the New Democrats. But when do you think we're going to get an answer on that? Mr. Davies has suggested they can make do throughout whatever the spring session is here, or the spring sitting is, but maybe would like some changes by September. What's your sense of the timeline before we know what happens with the NDP?
Well, those conversations are ongoing, and obviously they will have to reach a culmination point. We will not be an obstacle to those conversations reaching a culmination point. So, you know, I look forward to them continuing, and like I say, we're open to all constructive suggestions that honor the place and the traditions of the New Democratic Party.
Okay, I know I said one last question, but I lied. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you your thoughts on having the King open the session tomorrow with the speech. What's your sense of that moment? 1977 was the last time that happened.
Well, it's a singular occasion, an historic occasion. That word sometimes gets overused, but in this case, it's absolutely appropriate. And it honors the very origins of our country, the British parliamentary system, a king, obviously with two founding peoples and Indigenous peoples who form the founders of this country. It points us back to those things that our forefathers and foremothers did to build what is the best country in the world. And it'll serve as a reminder, I think, to all Canadians of that, of our best traditions. And so I, for one, am really looking forward to hearing what the King has to tell Canadians.
Government House Leader Steve MacKinnon, good luck in the weeks ahead. Thanks for your time today, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, David.
Okay, there's a lot there to get to with our next guest. Alberta Conservative MP Shuvaloy Majumdar joins me now. Sir, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here today.
Been a minute.
Yeah, it sure has. It's good to have you back. Let's start with that scene there. Mr. Scarpaleggia being dragged to the chair to be the new speaker. There were two Conservatives in the running for that until this morning. I mean, what do you make of the decision of Chris D'Entremont and Mr. Nader to bow out of that race?
Listen, it's a secret ballot, and parliamentarians, it's a deeply reflective moment for them to decide whether or not they want to stand as speaker. It's a huge responsibility. With it comes a responsibility to uphold the institution, to be the voice of the commons, of the people, and to make sure that that's a priority in every day. So, our Conservative colleagues are great people, and I'm sure they had their own reasons to decide to take their name off the ballot. But today
was some of it math?
The new speaker.
Was some of it math? Like if the speaker is an opposition MP, in a tie, they vote with the government to preserve continuity, and I guess in a minority parliament, that matters.
Well, look, I think in deciding who the Speaker of the Chamber will be, we've seen what the experience has been in the past. I think it's so important that Parliament choose a speaker today that actually allows for the rhythm of the debate to reflect the democracy of our country. And in so many ways, I think in the last couple of years, we just haven't had the opportunity to feel that. And so it's nice to see that a new speaker has been elected. And as our leader in the House had said very clearly, this is a chance for the speaker to uphold that rhythm of the debate and to make sure that the views of all Canadians are actually reflected in our national parliament.
How optimistic are you this will be a more functional parliament than the one that was just dissolved for this last election? Because things just weren't moving. It was very partisan. I know the political environment has changed quite a bit since last fall. What's your sense of how you expect it to go?
Well, listen, it's such a short parliament. I wish it were a longer parliament. I wish that we could actually do the work that the people of Canada have elected both government and opposition to accomplish. It's a short sitting full of some pageantry this week, some work next week, and then of course the government's going to be dealing with international summitry. But here we have a country in crisis, defined as such by the Prime Minister, a country that has to deal with some very heady issues of how we deal with a deficit, of how we deal with a plan for economic growth, a plan for taxes. The country can't afford to be at standstill any longer. And so it's a very short parliament to be able to predict to you exactly how it's going to play out. My hope and wish is that we can get to work for longer to actually see the budget and the plan that the new government would propose to Canadians and see it in this session.
Okay, so the plan, we'll get, I mean, there's the 7 points in the mandate letter, just a single mandate letter for all of Cabinet. And while it's limited in the number of points, they're all pretty broad, right? You can fit a lot of things into those. What sort of specifics are you watching for tomorrow in terms of the speech from the throne, in terms of how quickly this is gonna move with the new Carney government?
Look, there's a lot of issues this country has to deal with, whether it's things like the cost of living or actual solutions in building homes for people, on unleashing our economy and our resources, on confronting out-of-control crime, on fixing an immigration system that has sown chaos across this country. These are big, heady issues, big challenges. We know the government has been inspired by a lot of things that they've seen from the opposition and the Conservatives, and we applaud them for that. And Conservatives in the opposition had said during the campaign, we're ready to work for 100 days to pass 3 laws that are readily drafted and ready to go. Our platform is drafted and ready to go. It's costed and ready to go. It's a plan. Now, we were told that there would be a plan by this government, but it has not yet been presented, and they said they need extra time to do so, which I think is a bit unfortunate.
You think you could have had a budget ready to go by next month?
Twice before in elections, and as you would know, when I used to work with former Prime Minister Harper, I know what it means to go through the machinery of government, how to rely on the excellent civil service, the finance officials of which Mr. Carney once was part of. They would have had a transition plan. They would have had some thinking around how to manage the finances of the country. And Mr. Carney had a costed budget that he had presented through his own Liberal platform. So, in my mind, let's extend Parliament. Let's get to work. Let's get to work for the people of Canada on the priorities that I just intimated would be the important priorities of all Canadians. That's cost of living, housing, fixing the budget, growing the economy, unleashing trillions of dollars of resource wealth so that when the G7 occurs, the Prime Minister is well equipped to actually give the world what it has been demanding so much of.
But you know, Mr. Harper, when he was elected in 2006, I think the election was late January, sworn in February. There wasn't a budget until May. Right? Well, this is a fourth Liberal mandate, as you like to describe it. Mr. Carney's a new Prime Minister with a new plan. So, I mean, is the September-October budget truly out of bounds if you consider that he's here we are, late May?
Well, listen, Mr. Carney's government was won by the skin of his teeth. It was a big election in many ways where both parties performed very admirably. The Conservatives built a huge voting coalition, a generational shift for what the party now represents through 8 million votes in our national parliament and ongoing. You know, when Prime Minister Harper was first elected in 2006, it was a minority parliament after a decade of Liberal rule, with a new agenda and a new mandate and new ministers to bring in. That's not the case this time. We see a lot of the same old ministers still on the front benches. We see some fresh faces for which we hold some optimism and some good wishes, obviously. But when it comes to having an agenda and a continuity, even if it's a change of direction, well, the Prime Minister had already been making big decisions on tariffs, on partnerships with other countries like Australia, the United Kingdom, and France. He seemed pretty confident about being Prime Minister prior to the election. I wish he would be as confident today in presenting a budget that, you know, as somebody who presented himself as a strong fiscal manager, should be prepared to do.
Yeah, look, I know you like to talk about the 8 million votes, the Conservatives. I mean, it was a good election in terms of raw data for the Conservatives, right? You know, a gain of, 25, 26 seats with the Terra Nova flip. But, you know, they were 60 votes away from a majority. If you look at Windsor-Tecumseh, Terra Nova, the Peninsulas, and Nunavut. So, like, they also had a good result. And you know, he's going to go ahead at his particular speed. But, you know, Wab Kinew was here earlier, and he seems to think you're going to see decisions on things like the major national interest projects maybe as soon as next week. Not the final decision with the costing, but let's go there. And the Western premiers, and you're a Western MP, they're talking about, you know, an economic corridor, an energy corridor potentially to get things to Hudson Bay. If they start moving fast on things like that, does that satisfy some of the concerns you have about the lack of a budget and what you perceive as a lack of urgency?
Listen, we want progress for this country on its resource potential, on the potential of the West. I think it would go a long ways in dealing with a lot of the pressure of resentment that we're experiencing in Alberta and elsewhere right now. And good faith decisions, but piecemeal decisions that are half-baked without dealing with some of the things that have actually locked away investment from our country's resources, that have prevented us from getting our resources to Tidewater. And I'm not just talking about oil and gas, I'm talking about minerals, critical minerals, partnerships with other allied countries and economies. Like, these are all big decisions that are best fit as part of a national plan for a national budget. Now, we presented that during the election. We have a fully thought out plan on how to build economic corridors, shovel-ready projects, to build investment in this country and multiply it, to give Canadians an opportunity to participate in that unprecedented growth, like game-changing ideas. And so if you're still resistant on blocking pipelines, if you're still resistant on allowing shipping to happen off our coast, if you're still resistant to some of the things that we hear Minister Guilbeault and others in the last week indicate that they're holding on to the old policy, that we don't know what we're actually dealing with. Right. And until we see what they actually want to do, we'll reserve judgment.
Right. The quickest way to make you happy is to implement your platform. Right?
You know,
I don't think it's going to happen.
It was a great platform, and if you listen to Mark Carney, it might happen.
Yeah. All right. Well, Shuvaloy Majumdar, it's good to have you here. Thanks for being here today.
It's good seeing you again.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the NDP returned to the House of Commons with just 7 caucus members, short of the 12 seats needed for official party status. Reporters asked the government House leader today whether there's any chance of the NDP gaining that official party status.
The law requires 12 members to have recognized party status.
Standing order, not necessarily a law in provincial government.
No, it's the Parliament of Canada Act. Yeah, it's the Parliament of Canada.
Don Davies is the interim leader of the NDP, and he joins me now. Mr. Davies, it's good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Good to be with you, David.
The issue of your official party status. By law, you fell short of the 12 seats required to qualify for that, and the government House leader said yesterday it's probably not on the table. Where do things stand now in terms of your negotiations with the government, the Conservatives, the Bloc, to get some extra status for you and your other 6 MPs?
Mm-hmm. Well, where I'd start is to make it clear that New Democrats are going to do our job no matter what. But what we're actually asking for is some additional tools that would make us able to do our job a little bit better. These are standard parliamentary tools that all parties get that allow us to discharge our functions in a more responsible way.
Like what? What are we talking about there?
Well, having access to the onboard voting dashboard so that we know when votes are and can track who's voted and who hasn't. Having legislative research or communications resources so that we can understand legislation as it's happening. As you know, David, Parliament can move very fast. There can be a lot coming at us at once and things change. So your ability to actually keep up with what's happening allows us to actually cast informed votes. So these are resources that simply allow us to function better as a parliamentary group, and that's what we've asked for.
Right, so with this online voting dashboard, for example, if you have official party status, you get money for a whip. The whip can then use the online voting tools to send an alert out to members who haven't voted yet, telling them when the vote is closing. Because you fall below the threshold, you don't have a whip, so you don't get access to that. And because it's a minority, I presume you'd like to be able to function effectively when it comes to votes.
Exactly. Yeah, there's other things, of course, like how many questions you get in question period, whether you have access to additional statements in the House, when you can participate in debate. So 1.2 million Canadians voted for us, David. We're a national party. And for us to carry those voices to Parliament, I think is an important part of the Canadian political culture. And I would point out as well, that number of 12 is something that's very elastic. I've come up with about 10 different examples across this country where every single party has relaxed the number that you need for recognized party status. Conservatives to Liberals, Liberals to New Democrats to Green. Even the CAQ did it to Solidaire and the Parti Québécois. So this number is not immutable. There's nothing magical about the number 12. So that's why we've said in a minority parliament, where it's important to have millions of Canadians' voices expressed and we need to work together, maybe this is a good opportunity to do that.
So normally official party status comes with automatic statutory money. You would get extra salary, for example, for being the leader. Your House leader would get a salary. Your whip would get an extra salary. You're not looking for pay raises. You're looking for resources to make things function. So how effective, how fruitful have those pleas been, I guess, with the Liberals and the other parties? Or have you only been talking to Mr. MacKinnon at this point?
Well, first of all, I just want to really emphasize, you're exactly right, David, that we not only have not sought additional salaries, we would not accept them if they were offered, and they haven't been offered. What we're looking for is resources that would allow us to hire somewhere between 6 and 10 people that would staff up our caucus. And what I would say is we've had fruitful discussions with the Liberals and with the Conservatives. We've recently opened up a discussion with the Bloc Québécois, who's of course an important voice in this discussion. And I can tell you that things are moving well, and we've already seen, I think, some progress in a number of areas.
Well, Parliament kind of opened today with the pick of the Speaker. It really opens tomorrow with the speech from the throne, and then it will get going. You're going to need an answer on this soon. What are the timelines on this?
Well, as soon as possible. I mean, we're only sitting for 4 weeks in June before we rise for the summer. It'd be nice to have this resolved before then, but I think we can get through the next 4 weeks without it and then have it really established by the fall. So, you know, we're having ongoing discussions. The House leaders of both the Liberals and Conservatives are being very cooperative. And again, I hope that we can get the Bloc on side pretty quick.
Right, so they'll meet through the Board of the Internal Economy, which is sort of it's an in-camera management board, essentially, for Parliament. And New Democrats, when they have status, are part of that, but not part of it now. So it's going to be the Bloc, the Conservatives, and the Liberals meeting in a private meeting to decide whether you get these resources.
Exactly. Yeah, we elected a speaker today. One of the first things that's going to happen in the next couple of days is the striking of the Board of Internal Economy. And then they set the resources that are allocated to parties. So it's timely, and we're at the beginning of a parliament, you know, and I'm reminded that Mr. Carney says that he wants to unite Canadians. He thinks we all should come together to have a good united front against Mr. Trump, which I agree with. He's setting a bit of a tone of graciousness. He's done Mr. Poilievre a little bit of a solid by saying that he's going to facilitate his entrance to the House of Commons in a by-election as soon as possible.
Right.
So I think in keeping with that, it's in every Canadian's interest and to have a full participatory environment in the House. And I think New Democrats, we have a long history in this country. Our voice is important, and millions of Canadians are counting on us.
So you're looking for a solid as well, essentially to help with parliamentary function. But I wonder how this affects you politically as a party. Not guaranteed a question every day in question period, right? You're not necessarily going to be part of the action such as it is in Parliament. Not guaranteed seats at committee. These are fora for the NDP to advance arguments and be present in the political cut and thrust, and you're not necessarily going to be there.
Well, not to be too technical, there's going to be 8 questions allocated every week already. So we're going to be in question period every day no matter what. What I was seeking is 2 questions a day so we could make sure that we had a question in English and in French.
Sure.
So we're guaranteed 1 question a day. Committees, you're right, access to committees is one fora that may or may not be available to us. But I think the main thing is that we want to be able to participate fully in the legislative agenda. And in a minority parliament, minority governments can fall by accident, David. It happened in 1979 with Joe Clark. We want to make sure that we know what's happening and can analyze legislation in the proper way because our votes matter. We have 7 votes and the Liberals have 169. They're 3 short of a majority. So very often, New Democrats are going to be in a position where how we vote may determine whether a bill passes or not. And so we're making the argument that for us to discharge that parliamentary function in a responsible manner, we need the resources that allow us to carry out that role. Parliament is complicated. It moves quickly. Things change. And we need to participate. We're not asking for any resources that would go beyond that. And that's why I think the other parties are taking us seriously.
The other big bit of business today was the election of the new Speaker, Francis Scarpaleggia. It replaces Greg Fergus. What do you make of that decision? Mr. Fergus had a very difficult time controlling Parliament before the election for a bunch of reasons. What do you think of the challenge facing Francis Scarpaleggia as he steps into that role?
Well, I think it's the same challenge that faces every speaker that I've seen over the last 17 years, which is, keeping that balance between making sure the House of Commons is a vigorous, free place of debate and exchange of ideas while maintaining decorum and professionalism. And, I've seen the House really veer both ways, a lot of times mainly veering towards the lack of decorum. So I think that's our new Speaker's biggest challenge is how to facilitate debate. Democracy is under challenge all across the world, I think. And so our ability as a country to advance our democratic dialogue, to combat misinformation, disinformation, to have healthy exchanges of dialogue in a respectful but democratic way, I think is important. We're a G7 country. And so that's a challenge for the Speaker in kind of monitoring and facilitating that exchange.
Well, the Speaker needs a lot of help, right, from the members of Parliament. Just as a final point, Mr. Davies, it's early days, but what's your sense right now? Are we veering towards a functional Parliament or a dysfunctional Parliament just based on what you're sensing with MPs back in Ottawa?
Too early to tell. But I'll just tell you, Jack Layton said 2 really important things. He said it's every parliamentarian's primary role to make Parliament work for Canadians. And he said a good opposition doesn't just oppose, it proposes. And I've got Jack Layton firmly in my mind as I lead our small but mighty caucus forward in the next months ahead.
All right, Don Davies, interim leader of the NDP. Good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, David.